If you like our video, click the button to subscribe to our channel and get easy access to new content. To see our full suite of ad-free video courses, instruction manuals, and quick reference guides, visit us at www.teachucomp.com. The Select and Mask workspace in Photoshop lets you refine selections you make using the other selection tools in Photoshop. You can also use this workspace to make selections and then refine them at the same time. The Select and Mask workspace in Photoshop uses its own set of selection tools to make and refine selections, separate from the standard Photoshop tools in the Tools panel. However, many of these selection tools work in the same way as the standard counterparts, with some changes to their settings in the Options bar control panel. Note that the Select and Mask workspace in Photoshop replaces the old Refine Edge dialog box in previous versions of Photoshop. Additionally, the Select and Mask workspace in Photoshop contains view mode settings that let you change the way it shows selections in the preview image. It also contains two different refine modes with edge detection settings and global refinements settings that let you change how it makes and refines its selections. These settings appear in a Properties panel at the right side of the Select and Mask workspace. The Output settings within the Properties panel let you change the output of the Select and Mask workspace. While you can use it to create and refine selections, the Select and Mask workspace also lets you output its results as new layers, new layer masks, and new documents in various combinations. To use the Select and Mask workspace in Photoshop, click the Select and Mask button within the Options bar control panel after choosing any of the Marquee tools, the Lasso tools, or the Selection tools from the Tools panel in Photoshop. Alternatively, to show the Select and Mask workspace in Photoshop from the menu bar, choose Select, Select and Mask from the menu bar. Alternatively, to edit a layer mask in the Select and Mask workspace in Photoshop, select a layer mask in the Layers panel, and then click the Select and Mask button that appears in the Properties panel for the selected layer mask. At the left side of the Select and Mask workspace is the Tools panel and its modified set of available tools. The Preview Image and Selection appears in the center of the workspace. The Properties panel appears at the right side of the workspace. To reset the Select and Mask workspace if needed, choose Window, Workspace, Reset Select and Mask from the menu bar, or click the Reset the Workspace button in the lower left corner of the Properties panel. To change how the preview image and its selection appear in the Select and Mask workspace, choose your desired view from the View dropdown in the Properties panel. To choose how to show the selected versus non-selected areas in the preview image, depending on the view selected, then use the Transparency, Opacity, Color, and/or Indicates sliders and dropdown that appears below the dropdown. The sliders and dropdown that appear change depending on the specific view you select. To set specific display options for all views, check or uncheck the following checkboxes to the right of the View dropdown. To show or hide only specific refinements to a selection in the preview, check or uncheck the Show Edge checkbox. To show or hide the original selection in the preview, Check or uncheck the Show Original checkbox. To enable or disable a high quality preview, check or uncheck the High Quality Preview checkbox. To show or hide the Refine Mode, Edge Detection, Global Refinements, and Output Settings options, click the arrow next to the name of the options in the Properties panel at the right side of the Select and Mask workspace in Photoshop. To reset all these options to their default settings if needed, select the Default Choice from the Preset dropdown above the settings. Alternatively, to select options for each category and then save them as a new preset, select the Save Preset command from the Preset dropdown. To load and delete presets you saved, select either the Load Preset or Delete Preset choice from the Preset dropdown. To always use the options you specify, check the Remember Settings checkbox below the preset dropdown. To select the refinement method used by Edge Detection, Refine Hair, and the Refine Edge Brush tool in the Select and Mask workspace, click either the Color Aware or Object Aware button in the Refine Mode section. Color Aware is useful for well-defined objects on simple backgrounds. Object Aware is better for selecting fine details, like hair on complex backgrounds. To set the pixel radius for edge detection, use the Radius slider in the Edge Detection section. This sets the size of the selection border within which edge refinement occurs. A small radius produces sharper edges, and a larger radius produces softer edges. To automatically adapt the radius to image edges, check the Smart Radius checkbox in the Edge Definition section. This enables a variable width refinement area around your selection edge. To enable a smoother selection outline for all selections, use the Smooth slider in the Global Refinement section. To feather the edges of all selections, use the Feather slider to set the amount of feathering in pixels. To increase the abruptness of the edges within all soft edge transitions if desired, increase the Contrast slider. To shift all soft-edged selection areas inward or outward, drag the Shift Edge slider to the left using negative values or right using positive values, respectively. To clear your selection in the Select and Mask workspace, click the Clear Selection button in the Global Refinement section. To invert your current selection in the Select and Mask workspace, click the Invert button in the Global Refinement section. To remove color fringe from your selection when you output its results, check the Decontaminate Colors checkbox in the Output Settings section. Then use the Amount slider to set the amount of color fringe removal to apply. This option replaces the fringe color with the color of adjacent fully selected pixels when the selection is output. Due to this editing change, it also switches the type of output selected from the Output to dropdown. You can only enable this setting if you will output to new layers or new documents. To select the output of the selection, select a choice from the Output to dropdown. You can output the selection as a selection or mask within the current layer, output the selection as a new layer or document, or output the selection as a layer mask in either a new layer or new document. After applying the desired settings in the Properties panel in the Select and Mask workspace, then create or refine your selection in the preview image using the tools in the Tools panel at the left side of the workspace. The Hand tool and Zoom tool appear at the bottom of the Tools panel in the Select and Mask workspace, and both tools work the same way in the Select and Mask workspace as their regular workspace counterparts do. To use the Quick Selection tool in the Select and Mask workspace in Photoshop, click it to select it in the Tools panel. This version of the tool works the same way as the normal Quick Selection tool as discussed in a previous lesson, but has far fewer options in the Options bar control panel. To create or add to a selection, click the Add to Selection button in the Options bar control panel. To remove from a selection, click the Remove from Selection button in the Options bar control panel. To set the size of the tool, click the Size drop-down and then use the slider that appears, or type a value directly into the size field. To sample color from all layers if needed, check the Sample All Layers checkbox. Then click and drag in the image preview to apply your selection based on color similarity and edges. To use the Lasso tool or Polygonal Lasso tool in the Select and Mask workspace in Photoshop, click to select the desired tool in the Tools panel. These tools share the same button in the Tools panel. Both versions of the tools work the same way as their normal counterparts as discussed in previous lessons, but do not show the New Selection option in the Options bar control panel. To create or add to a selection, click the Add to Selection button in the Options bar control panel instead. After setting your desired tool options, then either click or click and drag in the image preview to make your selection. To use the Object Selection tool in the Select and Mask workspace in Photoshop, click it to select it in the Tools panel. This version of the tool works the same way as its normal version, as discussed in a previous lesson, but does not show the New Selection option in the Options bar control panel. To create or add to a selection, click the Add to Selection button in the Options bar control panel instead. Then click or click and drag to select the desired object in the preview image as usual. After making a selection in the Select and Mask workspace, you can zoom in to inspect it. To use the Refine Edge Brush tool in the Select and Mask workspace in Photoshop to refine the edges of selections using image edge detection, click the Refine Edge Brush tool button in the Tools panel in the workspace. Then click the Click to open the Brush Options button in the Options bar control panel and set the tool's desired size, hardness, spacing, angle, and roundness using the fields available in the drop-down panel that appears. To set what controls the dynamic size setting if using a pen or stylus and tablet, select the desired choice from the Size drop-down at the bottom of the panel. To close the panel, then click the Click to open the Brush Options button in the Options bar control panel again. To sample data from all layers in the image if needed, check the Sample All Layers checkbox in the Options bar control panel. To then refine the selection edge, ensure the Expands Detection Area button in the Options bar control panel is selected. Then click and drag over the selection edge to refine. Photoshop should then reevaluate the edges in the area and refine its selection. To restore the original edge, if the refined selection is worse than the original, click the Restores Original Edge button in the Options bar control panel. Then click and drag over the refined selection edge to restore. Finally, to use the Brush tool in the Select and Mask workspace in Photoshop to create or refine selections by painting the pixels to select or deselect, click the Brush Tool button in the Tools panel in the workspace. This tool works the same as the Selection Brush tool from Photoshop Elements if you are familiar with that application. The Brush tool in the Select and Mask workspace lets you click and drag over the pixels to add or remove from a selection, which gives you complete control over which pixels appear within a selection. To select whether the Brush tool adds or removes pixels from the selection, click the Add to selection or Subtract from selection button, respectively, in the Options bar control panel. If creating a new selection, also choose the Add to Selection button. To set the brush settings, click the Click to open the Brush Options button in the Options bar control panel and set the tool's desired size, hardness, spacing, angle, and roundness using the fields available in the drop-down panel that appears. To set what controls the dynamic size setting if using a pen or stylus and tablet, select the desired choice from the Size drop-down at the bottom of the panel. To close the panel, then click the Click to open the Brush Options button in the Options bar control panel again. To sample all layers with this tool if needed, check the Sample All Layers checkbox in the Options bar control panel. Then click and drag with the brush tool to select the pixels to add to or remove from the selection. To automatically find and refine your selection by including hair or fur at the edges of the selection after using any of the selection tools in the Select and Mask workspace in Photoshop, click the Refine Hair button at the right end of the Options bar control panel. Note that this option often works best when the Object-Aware Refine mode in the Properties panel is active. However, note that switching the Refine mode after making a selection may result in changing the edge of your current selection. A warning message box appears to ask if you want to proceed if you try to change your Refine mode after making a selection in the Select and Mask workspace. To output your current selection to the destination you choose from the Output to drop-down in the Output Settings section of the Properties panel after you finish your selection, click the OK button at the bottom of the Properties panel. Alternatively, to cancel all your changes in the Select and Mask workspace and return to your previous workspace, click the Cancel button at the bottom of the Properties panel. Remember to click the subscribe button to see more of our videos. See our full suite of courses, instruction manuals, and quick reference guides at www.teachucomp.com.